time in your life, you're probably asking yourself some very distinct questions. You've been through the first half of life, and you're ready to go to the second half of life. And it's important to distinguish the place that you are if you're on the first half or the second half, and there's some distinguishing elements that you'll notice. In the first half of life, it's more about ambition. It's more about being in the hot pursuit of a goal, mostly around materialism. It's about your identity. It's about who you are. It's about what you own. It's about what you do. It's about what others think at certain levels. I think it's more in your 20s when you're occupied by these ideas. But as you start to come into your 30s, sometime around 34, 35, you begin to see a conflict between your ambition and your values. And you start to say to yourself, is this all there is? You start to feel the tension between what really matters to you and having all these driving ideas that seem to run you amok in terms of your time, in terms of your choices. And so in this sort of path or passage, it's a very reactive way of living. And you become prisoner of your own machine. Things get very, very complicated. Now understand that this whole milieu that I'm describing is what an entrepreneur's passage tends to be. It's archetypal, meaning it has a repeating pattern to it where they have a very high level of growth, a big growth spurt, and then they peak at a certain point and it starts to contract, and you usually see it in their income. They start to plateau out in their progress, personally and professionally, and there's all this tension between the two different areas, the personal and the professional. And so they start to actually neglect or negate certain things that are consistent with their values, have been in their values, but they haven't really claimed it. They haven't actually moved into taking delivery of what those values actually are. And when they start to get into that halftime or moving into the second half of life, there's this sense of, I just don't have all the answers. I have a lot of questions, and I know that in order for me to go to the next level, it's a process of letting go of something in order to let something happen. So what do you have to let go of? Well, there's three things. The first thing we have to let go of is our status. We've gotten into an excellence trap. What we've done is we've grown up and we've gotten really good at something. We've gotten so good at something that the entire world and the relationships around us actually hold us prisoner to our own excellence. I call this the excellence trap. This is the #1 problem that the VIP coach program actually solves. Is the person has gotten so attached to their expertise, and yet the other territory, the values, their aspirations are far and away, and they can't reach them because they're so attached and entrenched to their status, and the public is also attached to their status. And so you see the doctor that just can't stop having all the appointments, or the chiropractor that's just burned out in all the mechanical work on repeatedly being a robot over and over again, or the attorney that's going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And the person's career sets into this deep sense of dissatisfaction and boredom, where the energy has gone out and all the stuff, the reactions, all this conflict, this internal turmoil has started to become very noisy. The second thing that we have to learn to let go of is we have to let go of our sense of safety. We have a deep voice inside of us that holds on to what we have because we're afraid of what might happen if we do. And this is our inner enemy of fear. We have a voice of fear. It comes from the past. Every one of us has it. And so I'm often coaching people on how to relate with this voice of fear. You know, and at first, because they've built up this self, this sense of power, that it's about using their willpower to kind of domesticate the fear, overpower the fear, you know, jump anyway, and they try to get themselves all worked up and cheerled into this inspirational fervor of building up all this, I'm going to slay the dragon and I'm going to do it all like this so that I can overcome the fear. And why do all the work? I mean, fear is something that is a product of how much you respect yourself. Look at fear as a form of, I really love myself a lot, or something I care about, and I don't want to damage it. I don't want to hurt it, and so I'm worried about whether that will be okay or not. That's a very noble idea. I mean, caring a lot about something and want to preserve it and making sure it's in good shape is a really noble idea. So why don't you turn toward that rather than turn against it? And why don't you attend and kind of befriend the fear as like an old rascal that you have, and know that it's there, because the moment you acknowledge the fear is the moment that you are not caught or trapped in the fear. So everyone has this. It is the shadow of our humanity. It is something that's naturally built into our wiring. And we have a fight, flight, or freeze reaction that triggers our chemistry to get ready for a threat. We were made that way. Our nervous system was composed to do that. So we can't work against our very nature. The nature of us is to find things that are dangerous, tend to see them, and then prevent them from happening before they do. So let that process be lived. Let that process be acknowledged. That's okay. But you have a choice. Actually acknowledging it and choosing to be dominated by it and rooted in it are two separate components. So one is to acknowledge it, is to know that it's there and acknowledge that you want to feel safe. Two is to investigate it and say, you know, this has nothing to do with my identity. It's not that you're a coward. It's not that you're not superior. It's not that you're one down because you're afraid. You are afraid, and you're supposed to be afraid, and your chemistry is made to be afraid. So why don't we be the observer and the witness and say, I'm afraid? Even just by acknowledging the truth of it, it just takes the balloon and pops it, right? It just, woo, it takes it down and stops the swelling. So that's the fear piece. You can leave the fear out the door and still create. You can still create while you're fearful, because creators learn they don't constantly monitor their levels of fear. They're constantly focusing on more dominant urges that matter more. And then the fear just sort of is, you let it lie, you let it be, and then at a certain point, the fear will probably be outgrown. And so fear becomes confidence. But what leads you into action is a dynamic urge that is more predominant or more dominant than the reactionary levels of the fear. So there's something on offense that's more or greater in pull than something that restricts you on defense. It's like a push-pull relationship. And this is something I call the escape velocity. And the escape velocity, it's not mine, I don't own the term, but think of it like sending a rocket to the moon. We have to pick up enough potential energy to get past the gravitational field of the Earth. And this is very similar to how change is created in our lives. So when we want to go to the next level and live within our aspirations, we have to have enough momentum on the front, on the new, in order to offset what's ready to end. Because the kinetic energy, the connecting energy, the restricting forces of the fear, the familiarity that we have, and the conditioning that we have is so strong that we've got to have enough thrust on the front in order to come to that point, that break even or 0 point as they call it, where we actually defy that point of restricting force, and then we go with the driving force. And we have to learn how to work with the mechanics of this and understand the forces at play. That those restricting forces are not there to be repressed, minimized, exaggerated, but they're there to be acknowledged and actually utilized as a source of learning. What is that force? Current reality. Current reality is the current state of life that you have. You have two ways into current reality. You either see current reality or you don't see current reality. You either deceive yourself with your own stories about current reality, your own concepts that you impose on reality, what's called downloading, or you have a factual relationship with reality. And creators learn how to acquire the taste of a factual relationship with reality, so they become resourceful with it. And so current reality becomes a useful asset. One of the things that they do to do that is to withdraw their status, is to take their identity out of what they're doing. That way they get to use failures as assets. They have very successful failures. Successful failures is a product of experimentation. They nudge out and try a mutated idea, they create and innovate, and then they use fast feedback from reality to make those little adjustments in tuning what their capacity is, and then they come into what it is they want to create. But there's forces at play. I experienced this learning how to sailboard when I was young. When I went out to sailboard, I had my two front teeth out, I had people laughing at me on the beach, and I was getting knocked around in the waves. And boy, was I reaching my limit. My pain threshold was here, and I was right here. I wanted to swim into the beach. That was the kinetic energy. That was the restricting force. My fear of humiliation, my sense of inconvenience, the emotional tension of having to work through this terrible period of learning and acquiring how to sailboard. But what kept pulling me forward was the decision to learn to sailboard, and the picture I had of the moment that I could get up and enjoy with my new skills the whole experience. And so I continued to stay anchored into that. And then as I looked at current reality, instead of telling myself and interpreting and adding meanings about who I was because I was screwing up or feeling unsafe, I acknowledged what I actually was doing. I said, what are my actual skills right now? And the more I was honest with myself, the more I could see where I needed to work on my balance a little bit more, what skill sets I needed to adapt, where I was failing, where I was not failing. It was a 50-50 relationship. 50% of the time what I tried would work, 50% of the time it wouldn't work, but I treated those two with equal value. I treated those two with equal value. Right. That is what it's like to work outside your need for safety and status. But there's one more, and the other one is your security. Close to what we just talked about. Close to what we just talked about. But your security has many, many different moving parts to it. Your security is your need to predict and guarantee something. This is the source of your procrastination on what you really want to do, on that heartfelt desire, that what I call that sacred project that's inside of you, that's ready to be claimed, that's ready to... The reality that you're in is very volatile, but the volatility yields vision. That you have a lot of volatility, that reality is like a wild card. You have no way of predicting what reality is made of or what it can do. All you can do is acknowledge what it is or deceive yourself. But volatility often yields vision. What's volatility? It's change, it's variation, it's mutation. It's going beyond the familiar. It's your challenge. VUCA, you. So the second one is everything is uncertain. So what is innovation? It's taking a meaningful leap into uncertainty. How do we take meaningful leaps into uncertainty? We have to listen very deeply to what's within us. We have to connect with our future self and commune with it. And that's our sensation of what is wanting to emerge from the future and connecting with that place and then actualizing that future. And so it means failing forward fast, eating failure flakes for breakfast, being willing to move into the future with an intention. We take our intentions into the future, but we have a sense of uncertainty with it. But we have a meaningful intention. We're drawn to it because we want to create a future that's alternative than the one we have. So what does uncertainty yield? What it yields is it yields understanding. By staying in the current reality that we have, by being present to what is here and now, and not getting caught in what the future has to be, but what we want it to be. In order to stay with the what and be pulled by the future, we're connecting with different organs of perception within us. We have to open our mind and suspend our judgment. We have to open our hearts and see through other people's eyes in the systems and in the relationships that we have with what we create. Because all of our creations, they don't happen as a solo trek. We're not individualists. If you look back at all the great accomplishments in history or same things that you've accomplished, you've done it through a group of people. So you're going to need relationships to do this. The future depends on it. You are interdependent irrevocably. You depend on other people to get things done that are more than your own capacity. Teamwork is essential. Teaming is depending on another person and their talents to accomplish something great, because it's something that you can't do on your own. That's teamwork. So uncertainty is staying in the moment long enough without bringing what you know, but suspending what you know so that you can become clear about what is really going on. And so we have to rely on other people to get data about where we actually are as leaders. So uncertainty actually moves us. It's the bridge that moves us into understanding. It's the portal. C. C stands for complexity. What's the number one challenge in business and personal today? I bump into this all day long. Complexity. We're perplexed by what's really going on. We can't see the cause that's creating the effect. Sometimes we're so entrenched in the very human systems that we're in like a partnership, that we can't really notice our own contributions from how we think to how we feel to how we act and then how we contribute to the outcome that nobody wants. So complexity is a very interesting thing. And because of our love affair with speed and our desire for mastery and our need for competency as a society, we've become hypnotized by so much that we've created the very complexity in which we complain about. So rather than orient ourselves to the complexity as an enemy and a blameful element, how about looking at it with a source of curiosity and wonder? And so complexity brings us into new questions that cause us clarity. Complexity actually yields clarity. So we have to harness the power of complexity by letting go of our judgment and coming into understanding complexity from where it is rather than from where we see it. And so this is a process, again, of letting go of our status, our safety, and our security to become aware and to become intelligent about what is going on or what wants to emerge from where we are. And the last one is A for agility. And agility is our ability to move at the speed of change. It means to plan at the speed of change. That if we get ahead of ourselves or behind ourselves in the past, we're not working from the context that's in motion. Because life is dynamic. Everything is in the state of change. Nothing stays the same. And so our belief systems, our very thought processes, are the things that dig in and want to reconfirm everything that we've been collecting in our observations. The problem with that is that the moment we come into reality, that may be very inconsistent with what we think is true or what we think is real. So instead of imposing our view on reality, we come into being agile enough to be coming into a fresh place constantly. We begin to refresh ourselves constantly by making ourselves available and making room in us for what is actually going on. We learn to see. And so by being agile, which means constantly recycling what we know into what we don't know, and coming into new potential sources of truth that we relatively see and then we holistically see through other people, we find ourselves being very, very clear. It actually takes away the ambiguity by being agile. And that's actually what A means, is the ambiguity is gone when we are agile. Or vice versa. I like this one, is that ambiguity that seems so threatening actually leads to more agility. And so it's been said that it's like staccato steps or staccato running over sharp rocks. You know, we are constantly moving at the experiments that we make so that we can elicit the kind of information that we need as leaders to be able to start to move our decisions, kind of be pulled by our decisions from that place of our own intentions. There's an interesting dynamic that happens when we take our intention, what we seek to create, and we put it at the center of our attention. We put it at the center of our awareness. Our intention and our attention. Our intention and our attention. You've probably experienced strange coincidences when this happens. Is that you go into the moment and you have an intention. You consciously choose what you seek to create. And so what you begin to do is you begin to, on your radar, you begin to take notice of certain things that you didn't do before. For example, if I want to buy a Mercedes and I drive around, why am I going to see the Mercedes everywhere? It's because I'm intending to create a Mercedes purchase. So my intention is informing my attention. And there's something that turns on in the brain, a reticular activating system, a base of cells, that actually activates and turns on our situational awareness to pack our intention into it. It configures itself around our intention. Our intention is a shaping instrument that actually pulls this attention in a certain way. What happens here is we begin to take delivery of almost mystical or strange experiences. It's almost like turning a light on. I don't know how a light turns on. I really don't. I couldn't explain it. But all I do is I know I need to turn it on. And this is one of those dynamics, is you don't need to know the anatomy of how this works. You just need to know that it does. So what is this? This is not the law of attraction, right? This is you holding the space in two things. Holding the space between a vision that you have and a current reality that you have too. Because you look to a far off place and you want to set your foot into that territory, but you also have one foot back at where you are. Or you have one eye on the road and you have another eye on the horizon. Isn't that what the Buddha taught us? That we see to the moon, but we also see to our feet? And so we hold the space between the truth of what we have and the honesty and the love of what we seek to create. And when we hold truth and love together, these are the two most energizing forces there are in the universe. Is that we actually change the flow pattern of energy and information when we hold these two reference points. This is what visionaries and artists learn how to do. Is that the entrepreneur learns how to hold these two over time. And that as current reality is advancing, as he is agile, bringing the ambiguity of it into agility and learning, as the complexity of it is moving to clarity, the uncertainty into the understanding, the volatility of it moving into more vision, he begins or she begins to learn on behalf of the intention that he or she seeks to create. And then current reality is constantly used as a resource of knowing where I am compared to where I want to be. The biggest challenge in all of this is being true to oneself. Is that we make choices to see reality as it is and confront ourselves and move away from our own mental junk about what is going on that we impose like a veneer. Instead, we look at it and we state it just as it is, good, bad, and ugly. And then we have a vision. But there's something else, is that as we take a deep immersion into the reality that we have, we kind of mine our cues. I call it mining a cue. We mine our experience, and out of it, we're told what inspires us. We're told what amazes us. We're told what surprises us. We're told what challenges us beyond the familiar. We're told what wants to emerge. We see the seeds that are emerging right out of nothing in the reality that we have, and we have to recognize that those seeds are where the future that we're wanting actually begins. But sometimes the future that we intend is not the future that might be intended of us. And so we have to look towards deeper levels of knowing. Instead of just occupying our own intentions, we have to cut the divide between ourselves and the whole that we are all a part of. And sometimes the message from the whole is a different message from our internal desire system. Our internal desire system is to move toward a goal or an aspiration that we love. But the whole kind of informs us as to what our call to action is. And sometimes if we look long enough and spend the time in the moments that we have looking at things, we become very struck by the omnipresent urges that we seek the desire as it is desired of us. And that we self-actualize, we connect with our future self by connecting with this message from the whole. The far distant voices that echo us back are mirrors from our whole. When we come into being this way, when we listen from our open will, where we let go of something and we let something come, when we release our holding on to security, we release our holding on to an old self, when we release our status, when we release all of these things that we think are needing to stay, we let come something that the future is needing from us. And we have to trust that. And sometimes what the future is not going to be what we expect. So we've talked about a lot of items, the VUCA world and the escape velocity, and how your ambitions get out of alignment with your values going into the second half of life. Letting go of the 3 S's here, the security, safety, and the status. and then what the relationship is between a vision and a current reality that you hold, and what starts to distort that, and actually what it is that helps these energy flow patterns of information and energy actually redirect themselves to more possibilities, and how to tap into our highest possible future by bringing our intention into our attention and sensing and actualizing a future possibility that begins to kind of sweep us off of our feet. We get a love affair with something that is desired of us from the future. So I have some questions for you. What is it that's waiting in your life to be ended? What are the elements in your life in terms of the volatility and the uncertainty, and what do you find in your life, or where do you find something ready to end? Where are you holding on to something that really needs to move out? Where are you also finding in your life the creative movement of something that's ready to begin? Where do you find the expansion happening, and where do you find the contraction happening? Where do you find things that are inflowing, and where do you find things that are outflowing? And where do you find yourself being overly generous with outflow and not accepting the inflow enough, maybe not accepting the help enough that you're being offered? Also, how about what is gathering in your life? That as you're living into your future, things are being gathered, new information, new acknowledgement, new tools, new grace, new opportunities. Are you really gathering those, and are you helping those rise to what they need to be? And what is it that's really releasing? What is it that's releasing and settling? What is it that's settling in, and what is it that's releasing? And these are some questions that you can ask to improve the intimacy you have with the life that you're inhabiting, so that as you live into listening to these creative movements by opening yourself like an antenna, your mind, your heart, your will, you begin to detect a new intelligence from which you are learning. Learning means to follow a track. And so you're following a track through more of the perceptions that you have in your wholeness, rather than isolated to just your intellect. What this offers you is everything emerges differently when you attend from a new source of attention. That your attention changes when you begin to see from new places. That's where the predictable miracles happen. So what do you really want to create? What is your intention? What is the destiny that's standing in need of you? What is the thing that's been in you that's been tickling you, whispering, but you haven't really said yes? And the moment that you do and you let go and step into that, put your footprint into the unknown, you will start to sense the momentum and the gravity of what you're about to do. So thank you very much. If you'd like more information about this, please go to highlevelperformance.com. I'm JD.